Good morning, everybody. I'm very excited to go to Barolo today. I have met Valentina Abbona a few times, but we've never actually had a chance to chat, so I'm extremely excited. She is so lovely. Hi, Lottie. Welcome, everybody. We're going to go to Piedmont. I just got a little voice message from Valentina. She's out in the vineyards in Barolo, so I'm excited to see what kind of view she has. She'll be here any minute. Thanks for joining in. Hi, Champagne Sommelier Officiel. Good to see you. I'm very well, thank you. Hello, sir. Let's see. I need to have a better shtick down. I don't have any vineyard chats hooked up this week. I have inventory, and there we go, to the Marchesi di Barolo. I'm expecting an extraordinary view. And I always get a little gassed. I'm like,
Non lo sento.
There.
No, è che non va la connessione.
I'm sure she's coming on any second. Thanks again for joining. Hi, Robin. Robin, I'm sure you know Valentina. I was just saying I've met her a few times, but I've never actually had a chance to chat. And that's the best thing about these. Hello.
Oh, yes. Hello. Little problem connection here in the vineyards.
Well, that's to be expected. You don't have Wi-Fi in the vineyard, so it's always a little bit like that. And there will be a delay in us, so I try to let you finish and then I'll talk. And welcome. I'm so excited to chat with you.
Same. It's been too long.
I know. And I was saying that we've met many times, but never had a chance. To chat for a half an hour. I'm so lucky. So,
yes, I'm the lucky one.
Would you begin by introducing yourself? And you have a unique story. I always ask how you got in the wine business, and you kind of didn't have a choice. But sometimes people leave and come back, and I just like to hear what your journey was.
No, well, that is exactly what happened to me. So my family owns Marchesi di Barolo Winery, which is an historical winery right here in the heart of Barolo. Actually, the first one where Barolo was ever made as the dry important wine that we know nowadays as the king of wine and wine of kings. I don't know whatever is better because I have the sun right in front of me. So growing up here as a kid, grazie, my brother here helping me. So growing up here as a kid, you could think that we had no choice, but in fact we had. So I studied economics and business in university, and from Milan I moved in different places around the world, including New York, and I ended up in China, where I thought I was going to spend not maybe the rest of my life, but at least a nice amount of time. In reality, I miss Barolo so much that I came home after 1 year or so. And I started in that moment to realize that I was missing all of this. I was missing the vineyards. I was missing the wine, because as a kid in China, I didn't have access to the great wine that here in Italy, in the States, we have so often. So I missed it so much that it made me want to come back home. And luckily, my parents were waiting for me with open arms. While my brother, for example, he's always been more involved. He studied winemaking and enology. And so he's the rock to which I hold myself on.
I love it. On that note, would you mind explaining how your family divides the work? I know you're also much the heart and soul of it, but I know you've got to divide it a little bit.
We try, at least. We say that the men do the hard work, so the one involved in the vineyards, so with the vineyard management and with the cellar management, while my mother and I are taking care more of communication, marketing, and sales. So I say that we try because then we're always stepping onto each other's feet. But I think that is also the beauty of being a family business. In this way, we are really able to exchange opinions and confront ourselves a lot, so to constantly grow and challenge ourselves too.
That's great. And you can't really quit the family, so no fight can be that bad.
At least not anymore. I had my one chance and that's gone away.
Exactly.
So now that I came back, I have to stick here. No, I'm just joking.
Could you, because there's a lot of people, I mean, you're in one of the iconic houses of Barolo, but also one of the iconic wine regions. For people who don't know, could you just give an overview about why Barolo in Piedmont is so special?
I'll try, because it's
It's a good
when it's
question.
in your heart, it's difficult then to explain. But the beauty of Barolo, it's this basically. It's the place where we are. Is this soil? Is this unique climate that really allow grapes that grow here to find their home and to find such a unique expression? As a matter of fact, our grapes are very stubborn. They don't grow everywhere, but only in specific places. And wherever they grow within these specific places, they would have such a unique expression that is unrepeatable anywhere else. So the town of Barolo, which is the town in which my family lives, where our winery is right here in the center of the village, is surrounded by mountains. So the Alps are very close by. We have great skiing here in winter time, just 1 hour driving from Barolo, and also high hills of the villages of Monforte, La Morra, Castiglione Falletto, which surround us, creating a double barrier, so to allowing a very unique climate within the town of Barolo. And the soil, millions of years ago, all this area, all the Barolo area was underneath the seaside. We're talking about 25 million of years ago. And when the sea went away, basically the seabed had risen, and we have different soil composition according to when the seabed rise from the water. So certain soils are more sandy, others have been more eroded, so we have more compact and stony formal soils, and this allowed the grapes to be either more expressive in terms of florals or fruits, or to be even more concentrated and be maybe more silent at the beginning, and then release their expression with time.
Beautifully said. Wow, that was such a good, concise history. You must do this a lot to tell that story.
Well, I have great teachers. Both my parents and my brother really trained me well in this year of pandemic.
I love it. Well, I bet. Yeah, I bet. Could you? I asked David to show us around with the camera, and you tell us where we are,
Yeah, sure. Well,
or is
actually,
that you holding the camera?
we can do this together. He's right here with me. So
Hi.
we are.
Hi.
Where are we, Davide?
We're in Cannubi, in the center of Barolo, so the first part of this beautiful hill of this beautiful vineyard. So it's a very terrific soil. So it's an honor for us having a vineyard in this kind of soil, because you can have different kind of expression of Barolo that come from this beautiful hill due to the characteristic, the feature of this soil. Because you have to know that in Cannubi you can find 3 different soils: sandy, on the top, then in the middle you will find silty soil, and after silty soil, at the end of this beautiful hill, you will find clay soil. So it's very special soil, this one.
It's a beautiful mix. We believe that the word Cannubi itself comes from connubio, which in ancient Italian means meeting, marriage, because of this meeting of different soil types that are found together in the same spot. And as Davide was saying, we're really central in the winemaking area, in the center of the village. Right there, I think you can see it, there is the castle of La Volta, which used to be the summertime residence for the Marcheses of Barolo, who had their home in the castle right in town, and their summer castle on top of the hill because of difference in temperature. So right here, there is a more mitigated and warm temperature compared to up the hills.
Okay. That's incredible. They're just like so close but so different. Could you give the history of your house then and tell us how Marchesi di Barolo is maybe different from the other producers in the region?
Well, so Marchesi di Barolo is indeed a very historic house here in the village. It was thanks to them, thanks to the Marcheses themselves, that Barolo was born as this important wine, which we were mentioning earlier. is actually thanks to Juliette Colbert, the last Marquise of Barolo, who arrived here in the village of Barolo back in the 1800s when she got married to Carlo Tancredi Falletti. And immediately from France, she realized that the wine that was made here was not comparable to the one that she used to enjoy in France, because it wasn't still, it was so sparkling and perhaps sweet, because there was no vinification tradition and method in the region of Piedmont. So she basically had the first cellar built underground and excavating into a vineyard, in a vineyard, so that temperature could have been more or less stable throughout the different seasons, so to allow complete fermentation. And she had barrels assembled and used for the first time in the area. So she allowed for the first time complete fermentation of Nebbiolo, which she named Barolo, in honor of the village in which this happened and from which she sourced her grape from. And from there, of course, we know that now Barolo reaches all over the world. But back in the days, of course, production was local, but yet Marquise Juliette was able to make it famous also in the surroundings. So that the first king that tasted Barolo, who was eventually the father to the first king of Italy when Italy was unified as a country and used to live in Turin, not too far away from here, was curious about it. So Juliette sent 325 barrels of her Barolo all the way up to the king's court, one per day and less than 40 days of length. And that is since Barolo is known as the king of wine and the wine of kings since that episode. So 200 years ago, more or less.
I love stories like that because we always hear about Veuve Clicquot as the famous woman in old wine days, but there's the widow of Sauterne of Yquem was very revolutionary, and Juliette. I love that story.
Yeah, and well, we are very much linked to the figure, of course, of Marquise Juliette, who taught then also the other families in the town of Barolo how to make a wine from the grapes that they were growing. And among these families, there was ours, who in 1929 then was able to buy the estate of Marquises of Barolo, so to continue this beautiful history, because unfortunately the Marquises themselves had no children. So they left the winery to a charity organization which managed it until 1929, in which then our family that was already quite well known in the area for winemaking got to buy the estate and continue this tradition.
Wow, that's so cool. And so when did your dad take over?
So, well, my dad took over when he was very young, actually, okay. Because the estate was bought by his grandfather with his brother and the two sisters. And then, of course, his father and him followed. But our grandfather passed away when Dad was only 16. So at a very young stage, Dad took over, and he's still here, very present, and teaching us so many things.
I love that. I had a question just about Cannubi. You were talking about the 3 different soils. Is it fairly uniform around Cannubi, and that's why Cannubi is its own place, or does it fluctuate a little bit within that vineyard?
Within the vineyard, well, it's difficult to say that one vineyard is completely the same in each portion of it, because of course there might be different steepness, there are different altitudes with the vineyards, and also different exposures. So when looking at specifically our plots, we can say that there is homogeneous situation, terroir, that includes, of course, all of these elements within the plot. I think that is more fair to be said.
Okay. And then just since we're very specifically talking about Cannubi right now, is there something, if people were blind tasting, that there's something very unique about Cannubi that you can tell?
Well, I would say that its balance, its harmony is really one of the elements that come through when tasting Cannubi, because of the situation that Davide was mentioning earlier. So this beautiful mix of soil types, the altitude of Cannubi really allowed this vineyard to be a sort of, come si dice parametro? like a something that you refer to when it comes to Barolo, as we're the benchmark when it comes to Barolo. So we tend to compare other vineyards to Cannubi because of this greater harmony that is found in it. Then, of course, it's very personal because it depends on your unique personality to be more into one or another expression of Barolo. But definitely, I would say the balance of Cannubi is really what stands out.
I love that. Okay. And then, you know, I have this question I sort of told you I was going to ask, because I'm always confused when you read about Barolo. There's this story of the modernists and then there's traditionalists. Can you explain that and how that comes across as wine? Because it always kind of confuses me a little bit.
Well, I think that especially years ago, this was much more evident than now. But we can simplify things, saying that traditionalists, Barolo producers, only use a big traditional barrel when it comes to winemaking, while more modernist producer also include, if not only, small barrique, either from France or from America. And this, of course, would influence the expression of the wine. When smaller barrels give a very flavorful and give this taste also to the wine itself, traditional barrels usually are more neutral. So this would, of course, be the main difference when it comes to to the tasting of wines, either from one or the other philosophy. But I would say that nowadays this distinction it's less evident than before, because I'm talking, for example, for us, our philosophy, but I can say this about most of the producers here, is really to follow the vineyard, to listen what the vineyard and your specific plot in the vineyard has to tell you. So to use the specific tools in the cellar, either big or small barrels, longer time in maceration or shorter, according to the grape itself and how this comes from that specific part of Barolo which you're looking at. And I can say this about Barolo, but I can actually apply it to any other production in the area.
I love it. Thank you. So another question is again, very, very simple, because I'm still learning and I get these questions. Is Barolo a full-bodied wine?
I'm laughing because it's I can understand it by not have always been in the wine business, how sometimes can be confusing. I would say yes, Barolo is definitely a full-bodied wine, but then it depends on which specific Barolo you are referring to, you're drinking. There are certain Barolos, like the ones that comes, for example, from Costa di Rosa, which is a vineyard right in that direction, basically. Very sandy vineyard, so very loose soil, where the roots really don't have to fatigue at all to find the water nutriments. We have a very delicate expression of Barolo from there. A very very perfumed Barolo with not such a big structure. So even pretty to be chilled down and enjoyed as soon as it is released. I would say that it's still a full-bodied wine, but surely different from what the imaginary of a full-bodied wine is.
Right.
So it really depends, and that is why we use different techniques in the cellar. Because, for example, on a Barolo like Costa di Rosa, we don't have to be too heavy with the wood used. While from vineyards like Cannubi or maybe Sarmasta, which is just basically in that direction on a hill, which is parallel to Cannubi, but completely different in terms of soil type. There is basically only stones and big rocks and clay, limestone, so much more dry soil where the roots really have to dig down and they're more stressed. We have a much more concentrated cluster and grape. Therefore, there we need more attention in the cellar, and also when it comes to the tasting, because the wine is more silent at the beginning and it just releases after time. So it's definitely more full-bodied than Costa di Rosa.
It's I love having the source of information right there, because these very simple questions are not simple questions.
No,
So
no, they're not.
I really appreciate it. On the other half of that though is it's still a bright wine. There's still acidity, and could you explain that for me? Because it's another thing that it's when you're asking people or when you're pairing wine, it's that acid is such a integral part of it.
Well, I would say both the acidity, so the freshness that comes from Nebbiolo grape, and the tannins of it, which sometimes are so balanced that you don't realize where one stops and the other one stops. So my dad uses this expression. I'm sorry, here tractors go next to me. And uses this expression, which I think is beautiful because really allows you to understand. So when you taste Barolo, when you drink Barolo, which is, I would say, one of the maximum expressions of Nebbiolo grapes in terms of power, in terms of intensity, first thing, your mouth will dry out because of the tannins. So you will feel immediately after you have swollen the wine, your mouth empty and dry. But then after a few seconds, saliva will start watering your mouth so much, and it basically cleanses it so well that you're ready to go to another flavor of what you're eating, and maybe change dish. So to me, Barolo is the perfect wine when you're sharing foods, because it really cleanse out whatever flavor you had before, and you can start with something new, even if flavors are really, really strong. So the power of acidity, it's really this one to cleanse out, and this effect is even more evident if before tannins have dried out everything.
Uh-huh. What a good answer. And that's really nice to be reminded that it is one of those universal wines that can go with many, many things. Would you tell us about the different wines you make? Because I have your Gavi and the Barolo and the Sbirlo. I'm not pronouncing that very well. But
Yes.
because your wines are always on my list. And particularly, can you explain? I want you to go through and tell us all the wines you make and maybe a pairing with them. But would you explain? It's hard to describe, or how to describe, the Barolo di Barolo to what customer?
Well, I don't think it's that difficult, because for us, Barolo di Barolo is like the family signature Barolo. So really looking into Barolo is like Barolo from the town of Barolo and from our family that comes from Barolo for a 6th generation of winemakers now. So Barolo di Barolo, which is actually Barolo del Comune di Barolo, then we shorten it in Barolo di Barolo. It's a blend of Nebbiolos grown on different estate vineyards, which our family owns within the municipality of Barolo. So we are not taking into consideration all the production area, but only this smaller village. We are only 700 people in Barolo. So that was one of the other reasons why I wanted to escape, because I thought it was claustrophobic. And then I realized how beautiful and how diverse Barolo can be, especially when looking at the vineyards. So Barolo di Barolo is a sort of a synthesis of all of this diversity in one wine. We vinify each single vineyard that we own separately. Vineyards are walking distance far, but yet they are completely different in terms of personality. One is higher, the other one is lower. One has a certain soil composition, the other one is different. We just saw this with Costa di Rose, Cannubi, and Sarmassa, which are 3 single vineyards all within the municipality, for example. So just extend that even more, and you will find the greatness of just the village itself. And so to me, that is a sort of little yet great expression of what Barolo can be. And it allows also to have even more fun than just the single vineyards, because you can really tell the personality of the winemaker that chooses what to put together and in which percentage according to the vintage. So traditional Barolo were always born as a blend of Nebbiolos from different sites to show this greatness and to show the personality of the winemaker, and also because of the opportunity, of course, of making more wine rather than smaller and many more expression from the smaller plots that we own on different vineyards.
Gotcha.
So it's to me, Barolo di Barolo, it tells our history, our tradition, the beauty of our town. So it's but yet it's one town out of the 11 in which we can make Barolo. So that's why it's a little but great expression of Barolo.
Truly. Is it the same percentages every year, or it's always will
They
vary?
might vary according to the vintage, but usually, vineyards are always the same. So it's just a choice, an opportunity according to the climate and how each vineyard reacted to the climate of that specific vintage.
Okay. So would you go into sales mode for a second and talk us through the different wines that you do make?
Well, we live in this little town, yet as I said many times now, the area is very diverse. If we just go out to the village of Barolo, we will find even more diversity and even more opportunities of showing just a few grapes that we grow in Piedmont. So going our way most east as possible, we are in Gavi. Gavi is actually quite close to the seaside, to the Ligurian Sea. So great salinity in that white wine. I'm sorry, I have received a call.
That happens. No
So
worries.
great freshness, great crispness from Gavi, made out of Cortese grape, which grows basically only in that area. We don't grow Cortese here, and it's only 2 hours far from Barolo. And we don't grow Nebbiolo in Gavi. So that's how exclusive our areas and our grapes are.
You know what? One little thing that I love about your wine is that very distinctive green foil. It's my first Italian white, and I can grab it quickly from the cellar or the cooler.
That was that choice. So to reflect, that freshness and how it reminds immediately of the sea and of the breeze that you can find while sitting, at the seaside. Even though we are inland, we still have a lot of sea influence, which we don't find here. So that's why we don't grow Cortese here. And then walking our way more east, more into the Monferrato and then the Langhe area, we grow Barbera, with which we make a Barbera from Monferrato, which is very juicy, fruity, really alive, just as the vineyards of Monferrato are. A Nebbiolo Sbirolo, which is a Langhe Nebbiolo, which is the first interpretation of Nebbiolo, coming from very sandy vineyards within the Langhe area. So really fresh, really expressive. It doesn't even need aging in wood, because it's already so alive and so beautiful. So the name Sbirolo refers exactly to that sort of personality. So it's the first step when approaching Nebbiolo, so to get to understand the grape and then get to understand what a full-bodied wine is when you arrive to Barolo.
And that, I will tell you, that wine, people always have a second bottle, which is the highest compliment.
That.
Always.
I love that. Dad always laugh when talking about that wine, because the label is very captivating. He has this kid on it, and he always say, when I drink this wine, I think of you guys, who you didn't even want to think about the winery. You, Davide, were driving me crazy with the school, and then look at what you became. So eventually, even a Nebbiolo, which is so playful, so joyful, like this Barolo, could become one of the most important Barolos if then planted here in the Barolo area. So it really allows you to see how eclectic, how versatile Nebbiolo can be. It's just that we always think at that very big and bold expression, and we tend to forget about that live and easy one, which we can still have just on other vineyards in this area.
And then can you just talk us through you make a few more wines, I believe.
Yes. I didn't know how much I could go, but of course, Barbera from Alba, which is one of our most traditional grape variety. It's actually the most widely grown varietal within Piedmont. Barbera, it's really fruity, juicy as a grape. It has a great acidity and very little tannins, so it doesn't have that drying power that Nebbiolo has, but just the rinsing power. So it's a beautiful wine to pair with, but it's really food demanding, Barbera. And our Ruvée is blended with 15% of Nebbiolo just to balance a little bit with a little bit more tannins. Ruvée means old roots in our dialect because of the vines, which are very old, that we have planted in our vineyards. And then, of course, Barolos, the most classic one, made with grapes coming from several vineyards throughout the production area, which is our Barolo Tradizione, tradition, as most traditional as possible. The Barolo del Comune di Barolo, for the friends of Barolo di Barolo, like you. And then, of course, the single vineyards, such as Cannubi, Sarmassa, and Coste di Rose, with their different personalities according to the specific site. We could be speaking forever about our wines because we make many, but not because we make a lot of wine. It's because with the few grapes that we grow in the region, Dolcetto, Barbera, Nebbiolo, as far as reds, Cortese, Arnese as far as whites, and then Moscato, so only basically 6 grape varietals, we can really play a lot in their expression according to the specific vineyard, so the terroir in which these grapes are grown. So we have up to 6 Barolos, but only because we and that is even a little number if you think that in Barolo we have 170 different single vineyards that deliver a specific expression of Barolo. So it's really relative, talking about numbers according to, what you're looking at.
It's kind of mind blowing when you start to really dive in like that. I'm going to let you go very shortly because we're at a half an hour, but Instagram will let us go. I understand. I used to keep it right at a half hour, but I won't keep you too long. I just have this is again one of my silly kind of basic questions, but tomato sauce. I never know what to pair, and I know I'm in your country. I should go there. Explain how to pair with tomato sauce and what
sauce in every region.
Well, yes, exactly. But why does tomato sauce work with red wine, and what wines that you make go with tomato sauce, whether it's pizza or spaghetti or any of that kind of stuff?
Well, I would say that this is an interesting question. It's not as simple as you can think, because actually tomato has a very high acidity. So perhaps you want to pair with something that doesn't have the great acidity. I'm thinking in the region here, I would say either Arnese, which is a white varietal, but with a strong personality. If you taste it blind, you could think that is actually a red wine because it's very intense and creamy and round in your mouth. Or maybe a Dolcetto, which is another very typical varietal from the region, which is quite tannic, but really, really low in acidity. Or, you can play with Barbera and Nebbiolo according to where they're grown. Maybe I wouldn't have a delicate, only tomato sauce pasta with a Nebbiolo. I would have maybe a ragu, which has meat inside that immediately levels it up to a different intensity, also flavors. So you can really play a lot with tomato sauces.
It's true, and then just the different ways they're prepared. Can you explain tar and roses for me?
In the wine?
Yeah, it's something that people. It's like the classic description of it, but it's a kind of diaphanous thing that comes and goes.
Yeah, that is why when you ask me what you would describe as a as an element that distincts Cannubi, I didn't want to go there because it's too broad is too generic as an answer, because you can actually find these notes in most of the Nebbiolos, but then again, according to which specific location or expression of Barolo you're looking at, these could be more or less defined. So the roses, of course, rose petals is the note which you find in Nebbiolos, especially when they are in their youth. I would say after the fruit, you will find this very delicate, it comes after. So it's a sort of, I don't want to say silent note, but of course it's really difficult to really identify it, in my opinion, because it's kind of ephemeris. While tar is kind of the opposite. really, really strong, and you might think that is a very bad thing to find in
Right.
a wine.
Exactly.
It's actually one of the most distinctive yet beautiful elements and notes which you can find in a more aged Barolo. So you switch basically from the softness of the roses and of the fruits to something more intense and more like soil, so a little more rough. It switches like this from the sweetness, I would say, to something which is more terroso. Help me, like like earthy. That is the
Okay.
word I was looking for.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, but it's very hard to there, and especially, I mean, I'm talking to tables all night long. There are words it's hard to say. It tastes like tar. It doesn't sound good. Same, acid is another word that we don't like to use.
Yeah.
You can't ever say sweet, even though there's a sweetness always it's a
Yeah.
fruit. It's language is one of the reasons I like doing my job, I
And
guess.
honestly, probably is my background, as I haven't been studying wine. I'm not as biased, so I tend to speak about the wines like people. I rather refer to them with adjectives which I would use to describe a person. The kindness, the sweetness, or maybe the roughness that you find in certain wines. But it applies to me because I didn't study wine. I got into wine. My whole life was into wines, but usually when we're home, we talk the wine as they were people. So probably that's why I tend to describe them in another way, and I try to give you some answers now.
I love that. No, that's a really good way of doing that. I describe it as music. The way my brain works is I'll say it's like a Vivaldi string quartet or something, but everybody's different.
Well, but everyone, I think, in my opinion, can refer to wine to whatever makes him feel more comfortable. There are some music experts which refer to wines as different music styles or different bands. I think it makes completely sense, just because music, like wine, like the personality of a human being, are so personal. So you can really align them and put all of them in certain categories,
Yeah.
and then you will find similarities for sure.
Well, and it's because I think wine is such a meaning senses, sensual thing, that what I'm tasting in my mouth, how do I convey that to you? It's very,
Exactly.
very, very difficult.
Exactly.
Valentina, I'm going to let you go. You are so wonderful to chat with. Expect occasionally, I won't bother you too much. I have you on WhatsApp. I'm going to send you weird questions now and then.
Please do.
Okay.
I can talk for all my family. We miss traveling. We miss
We
having
miss
our
you in
friends
New
at
York.
home. So please bother me all the time, because
Okay.
we need the contact.
I appreciate it. I still remember, I think it was Del Posto, right? You and your mom were there. We had a big lunch at Del Posto. So we can't wait for the next time you're here. I look forward to seeing you, and thank you so much for your time. You're a delight. And thank you, David.
Thank you to Davide too. Yeah, great.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, guys. Take care now.
Ciao,
Bye
ciao,
bye.
grazie.
Ciao. 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 Ciao.